gone into a lawyer.
If you own your own home or even thought about it, think about this. Someone pretending to be you could actually sell your house, have you evicted, and leave you on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sound impossible? Well, it happened to Susan Lawrence. Sound completely unfair? That's what she thought too. So she took on the legal system, and this week a decision came down. Here's Joan Leishman with Fighting Fraud.
Susan Lawrence is a Toronto businesswoman with a passion for curling. She loves competition, loves to win, but she demands things are done fairly both on and off the ice. And another thing about Susan, she's a smart, independent businesswoman who was blindsided.
Never. I never heard of mortgage fraud. I had never heard of title insurance. I had never heard of any of it.
This was the kitchen.
Susan has lived in this house for 25 years. It was the first home she bought with her husband. When he died, she stayed, not wanting to move away from the memories. Susan's nightmare here started last spring. Here's how it all began.
I was coming home from curling, and it was about 10:30 at night. I immediately went upstairs, trying to get ready for bed, and there was banging on the door. I looked out and I saw a car in the driveway, but that's all I could see because the front porch is covered. It got worse. Then he took this flashlight, this huge flashlight, going up and down the hallway like this, and still the consistent banging, banging, banging. So I thought, oh, someone's breaking in. That's exactly what I thought. Someone's trying to break into my house. So I called 911, and she stayed on the line with me. Now, the police were here within 3 minutes. I was amazed. And she told me to go to the front door and talk to the police, and that's when the guy served me with the paper in front of the police officer for going to court to evict me from my house.
So notice of eviction at 10:30, 11 at night.
Yep. Yep.
That's how Susan Lawrence found out that she had been the victim of mortgage theft. Someone had made up phony documents and pretended to be Susan. The phony Susan sold the real Susan's house. She sold it to a man who called himself Thomas Wright, a man who was also using fake documents. Then, the fictitious Thomas Wright borrowed $300,000 to pay the phony Susan. The two frauds then happily skipped out of town with the money. All of this left the real Susan Lawrence living in a house she didn't own with a huge mortgage that no one was paying. Right across the country, the crime of mortgage fraud seems to be growing. It's relatively easy to carry out and extremely difficult to catch the thieves, says Toronto Fraud Squad detective Steve Lamplugh.
If I was criminally minded, I wouldn't be putting a balaclava on my head and robbing a bank knowing that I'm risking bodily harm, I'm risking, a lengthy jail term and so on, when I can sit in my jammies in my home and do a mortgage fraud, and, by tomorrow I could be a couple of $100,000 richer.
Or, in Susan's case, $300,000 richer. After a very long and very expensive court battle, Susan did get ownership of her house back, but the mortgage problem didn't go away. How did it happen in the first place? Well, people buying houses want their mortgages quickly, and banks and other lending institutions are eager to please. In the rush, some of the old safeguards are gone. For instance, home appraisals.
Okay, plaster walls, nice molding. That's a tumbled marble backsplash. Ceramic tile.
Ed Sachs is one of the few who does things the old-fashioned way, actually going to the home, meeting with the owner, and figuring out how much the property is worth. But Sachs is an exception. Almost all appraisals now are done electronically. And why is that? Well, the bottom line, time and money. To do things this way, it costs about $250, and it takes about 2 days to get the report. If you do it online, it takes less than an hour. And it's not just appraisals. The land registry system is electronic now too. It's meant to be used by realtors and lawyers, but for $600, anyone can get a hold of the software, get into the registry, and find out every detail about your house. It's not clear if that's what happened to Susan's house, but it is clear that Maple Trust did not come out to appraise it in person or the company would have discovered she hadn't asked for a mortgage at all. But the company didn't, and she was on the hook. Susan needed a lawyer and found Morris Cooper.
Susan had come in to ask me about a statement of claim that she had been served by Maple Trust seeking possession of her home. In other words, to evict her from her home on a mortgage that Maple Trust acknowledged in the claim Susan had nothing to do with, but rather it was registered against her property, and Maple Trust said under the law of Ontario that's a valid mortgage and enforceable by them.
Cooper had to tell Susan that Ontario law stipulated that the fraudulent mortgage was completely valid and she had to pay.
You can imagine Susan's reaction when she was initially dismissive about the idea of how could Maple Trust sue her on a mortgage that she had nothing to do with, to find out from me that it was much worse because under Ontario law she had no defense to that action.
How can that be?
It is because our Ontario Court of Appeal in November of 2005 decided in a completely different fact situation that fraudulent mortgages are valid and enforceable once they're registered.
Susan was at a dead end as far as the law went. All she could do was apply to a provincial compensation fund for money to cover the mortgage and her legal fees. But Susan thought that was wrong. It would be letting the crooks off the hook.
And then I kept thinking, once again, back to the same thing, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong what these people did to me. It's wrong what they're getting away with. And it's more wrong that people, innocent taxpayers, have to pay for this. They're practically saying, okay, crooks, you've committed a crime, now here, let's pay this. We'll just pay this $300,000 out of our pocket. It's wrong. It's wrong, totally wrong.
Susan's courage in this can't be understated. What the other victims have done that Susan did not do was to decide that I'm not going to go to the fund. This is profoundly wrong. I'm not going to go and ask for taxpayer money to pay off Maple Trust on a mortgage they had no business putting on my house.
And I said, Morris, have you ever been to Supreme Court? And he said, yes. And I said, did you win or did you lose? He said, I won. I said, okay, give me the weekend to think about it. And I looked up Morris's case at the Supreme Court on the internet. And I called him Monday morning and I said, let's go for it. And so we decided to appeal the decision.
On Tuesday, the court came to a decision. It ruled 5-0 in favor of Susan. The judgment said Maple Trust made the decision to advance money and had the opportunity to avoid the fraud. The mortgage was declared invalid, and Scotiabank, the new owners of Maple Trust, had to absorb the mortgage and all of Susan's legal costs.
I don't think I'm a hero like everybody says. I think I'm just doing what's right.
The determination of this one woman to fight for justice and common sense has changed the ground rules of real estate in Ontario forever. Victims of mortgage fraud won't be held responsible for those mortgages. But what hasn't changed is just how easy it can be to carry off the crime in the first place. Joan Leishman, CBC News, Toronto.
Good for her. When we come back, we'll check